Welcome back to the deep dive.
Today, we are charting a deep course, I think, through some really complex maps of identity, trauma, and fate.
Yeah, the sources we have today are just incredible. We're talking about the parallel lives of two people in Japan, vastly different individuals.
Right. But their lives are fundamentally defined by these huge acts of escape, of memory loss, and this strange, almost karmic entanglement.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To understand the price of running away, what the actual shape of fate looks like.
And maybe most critically, how violence, and I mean hidden, suppressed, even internalized violence, can permanently change a person's consciousness.
It's fascinating. We've got a 15-year-old runaway, Kafka Tamura, on a mission to become, and this is a quote, the world's toughest 15-year-old.
And on the other side, you have an elderly man, Satoru Nakata, whose entire personal history was just wiped clean by this bizarre incident back in 1944.
They're like two sides of the same psychological coin, but separated by decades.
It's such a remarkable collection of material because it forces you, the listener, to look beyond the obvious narrative. You have to treat a teenager's meticulously planned escape with the same gravity you'd apply to a U.S. Army intelligence report.
Right.
And the thread that connects them is this search for a self, for a persistent identity in a world that just seems determined to tear it apart.
Okay, let's start with Kafka Tamura. What immediately strikes me isn't just, a teenager impulsively running away.
No.
It's the preparation,
Right.
the almost surgical precision of it. This isn't a rash decision.
Not at all. It's a strategic, I'd almost say military-grade operation. And it's driven by this inner voice.
The boy named Crow.
The boy named Crow, exactly. It's this crucial mechanism for self-discipline, for building an identity. Crow is constantly in his ear, acting like a personal drill sergeant.
He's pushing him.
Constantly pushing him, acknowledging that, yeah, Kafka's gotten stronger, but he's still only 15. He needs this absolute resilience, a mental fortress, to face what he thinks is this brutal world waiting for him.
And the prep wasn't just mental, though that was obviously huge. The source shows him just systematically hoarding knowledge.
Soaking it up like a sheet of blotting paper.
Yes, because he knows that his chance for formal learning is about to just vanish.
Right. But the physical training, I think, is what really sells the transformation he's aiming for.
Oh, absolutely.
It's so fiercely focused on deception. He starts judo, he's at the local gym, doing circuit training, jogging, bulking up.
But it's not just for fitness, is it?
Not at all. The goal is appearance. He explicitly says he needs to pass for 17.
Because if he looks his real age...
He's immediately on the police radar. It's mandatory reporting. His escape is over before it even begins.
So it's a literal physical effort to create a new identity, a new sheath for the outside world. It's a protective wall against the law. He gets that his freedom depends entirely on blending into the adult landscape.
It shows a profound level of maturity for a 15-year-old, a deep understanding of how he's going to be scrutinized by the world. And that need for this immediate protective disguise, it informs every single practical choice he makes.
Speaking of practical choices, let's look at his resources. The sources say he stole a pretty significant amount of cash.
Close to $3,500, plus an ATM card. Enough to last.
But it's his gear selection that tells a deeper story, I think. He curates this toolkit for survival, a sharp folding knife.
Made to skin deer, which suggests he's anticipating this ragged, almost feral existence.
Exactly. A small gold lighter, a sturdy flashlight, and of course the sky blue Revo sunglasses.
That final layer of disguise to hide his age.
And at the same time, you see this immediate rejection of anything flashy. That's a huge psychological indicator.
Oh, it's key. He thinks about taking his father's super expensive Rolex.
The Sea Dweller, yeah.
He calls it a beautiful watch, but he realizes that thing is a tether. It connects him to his old wealthy life, and it would just, quote, attract attention.
So he leaves it.
He leaves it. He goes for a cheap functional plastic Casio with an alarm. It just shows the rigor of his psychological wall. Practicality and anonymity over everything else. He's stripping himself down to the most essential, invisible version of himself.
But he does take one thing that's highly sentimental, highly symbolic.
The photograph.
The single mysterious photograph. It's him and his older sister on a beach. He was 3. And her face is half in shadow.
Like a Greek tragedy mask. The source describes it as half light and half dark. Hope and despair.
Trust and loneliness. It really sets up the whole reason for his flight, doesn't it?
It provides the foundational vacuum. He knows he has his father's eyebrows, that the DNA is inescapable, but he's missing the memory, the image of the other half of his genetic makeup, the mother and sister who just vanished when he was 4.
So this photo, which his father kept, is his only physical link to that lost family.
Right, so he's running away from his father, but he's also running toward the mystery of those absent women.
And this is where we get the philosophical framework for this entire deep dive. This is where it gets really interesting.
The sandstorm.
The metaphorical sandstorm. It's not just some dramatic image, it's Crow's definition of fate.
Or at least the kind of fate Kafka has to willingly accept. It's this necessary, violent, internal mechanism of transformation. Crow's warning is chilling. He says, this storm is you, something inside of you.
And you can't outrun it.
You can't. The sandstorm keeps changing direction. It chases you. No matter how far you run from Tokyo, it doesn't matter. Distance will not save him.
But if it's purely internal, you'd think maybe he only hurts himself. The source material really pushes back on that easy interpretation.
It does. The only option Crow gives him is to step right inside the storm.
And the language is so visceral. It's about damage. Close your eyes, plug your ears, walk through it step by step.
Knowing it will, quote, cut through flesh like 1,000 razor blades.
It has to be experienced, not avoided. This is the intellectual friction we have to explore.
And the outcome isn't victory. It's not about beating fate. It's about absolute transformation. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. This is his initiation. This is how he becomes the world's toughest 15-year-old.
But here's the key detail, the one that contradicts the whole internal storm idea, the explicit promise of bloodshed.
It guarantees violence and blood, your own blood and the blood of others.
Right. So if the storm is internal, why does it promise to spill the blood of others?
And that is the core tension. It's foreshadowing. His quest isn't just a journey of distance, it's a metaphysical confrontation that is going to manifest physically and violently in the real world.
So his inner turmoil will actually compel him toward external actions.
Exactly. His escape isn't a retreat. It's an act of engagement with fate. The trauma he's trying to outrun is going to require him to generate new trauma just to survive it.
Wow. That sets the stakes incredibly high. Distance might not solve anything, but maybe a radical, violent transformation will. So, having built his wall and accepted this, the sandstorm's inevitable arrival, he gets on the night bus.
Which brings us to Kafka's search for sanctuary and the weight of connection.
He chooses Shikoku.
Right, far south of Tokyo, separated by water, and it's based purely on a feeling he got from looking at a map.
The least likely place anyone would look for him.
It's a calculated move for anonymity, and he gets there on a long, cheap 10-hour bus ride. The first practical step of his escape plan is now in motion.
And on that bus ride at a rest stop, just as dawn is breaking, he has his first major encounter. Sakura, a young hairdresser. She's observant. She immediately clocks him as quiet, maybe troubled, but she's also really practical.
And she helps him right away. She lies about his age to an official, says he's 17. She gives him this unsolicited layer of protection. And there's this fleeting connection. She mentions a younger brother she hasn't seen in a long time.
And their conversation immediately brings up this theme of coincidence versus destiny, which becomes one of the dominant philosophical weights in the whole story.
It starts with that old proverb. In traveling, a companion. In life, compassion.
And Kafka's first take on it is pretty simple, right? He just says that chance encounters are what keep us going. It's an innocent, practical view of travel.
But Sakura, who kind of embodies this practical wisdom, she pushes him much deeper later on when they meet again. She introduces a concept that's way heavier than simple coincidence.
Even chance meetings are the result of karma.
That is a massive philosophical weight to put on a casual meeting in a roadside cafeteria.
Yeah.
It completely contradicts the idea that Kafka is just choosing his own path, that he's in control.
It suggests his entire escape plan was preordained.
Yes. That meeting Sakura, or anyone, is just the execution of a score that was written a long time ago. His journey isn't random wandering, it's just moving along these predetermined lines of fate, of karma.
So if everything, even the smallest encounter, is karmic, then the sandstorm isn't some future challenge he has to face.
No, it's the immediate consequence of his existing life. He can't escape his origins.
The implication is that even choosing Shikoku was just an illusion of free will.
Correct. It suggests that if he hadn't left, fate would have brought all these people and events right to his doorstep in Tokyo anyway. Kafka is just changing the scenery for a play that's already been written.
So he finally gets to his destination, his designated refuge, which he had meticulously researched.
the Kimura Memorial Library in Takamatsu.
And he sees it as more than just a place to hide. He calls it a real home. It's this space of calm, silent order, the comfort of books, the total opposite of the chaotic house he fled.
And this refuge comes with its own philosophical guide.
Oshima.
Oshima, the assistant librarian. He quickly becomes this intellectual compass for Kafka. He's a really complex figure who represents this fusion of fragility and strength.
He's very subtle about it, but he discloses his own complicated relationship with risk because of his hemophilia.
Right, that he drives fast as
Yeah.
a form of compensation for a life where he has to be constantly careful not to bleed.
That detail is so crucial. The person offering Kafka a safe place is himself defined by this internal, fatal weakness that he actively compensates for by embracing external, calculated risk.
It's a lesson for Kafka. It tells him that vulnerability isn't just acceptable. It can be a driving force for a kind of unconventional strength.
And Oshima then introduces this idea of imperfect perfection through his taste in books and music. And this is a direct challenge to Kafka's whole quest to be the world's toughest 15-year-old.
Which is really a quest for a flawless, unbreakable identity.
Right. Kafka's reading Soseki's The Miner, which he calls an imperfect novel. It's about a passive runaway who goes through these life-or-death experiences in a mine.
But emerges fundamentally unchanged. It's like the anti-sandstorm narrative.
Exactly. And Oshima balances this literary imperfection with a musical one,
Schubert's Sonata in D major.
which the composer Robert Schumann famously called heavenly tedious.
And this is where the synthesis happens. Oshima argues that great pianists try to play it precisely because it's imperfect. It forces them to add something of themselves to complete it. And he concludes that true perfection is a limitless accumulation of the imperfect.
That completely reframes what Kafka was aiming for. It's not about being flawless or unbreakable.
Well,
It's about absorbing and enduring the accumulation of all those messy, difficult, imperfect moments. The blood, the running, the memory gaps.
that's the only path to a complete identity, not a polished, ready-made one. It gives meaning to the inevitable razor blades of that sandstorm.
So for 8 days, Kafka sticks to this new routine. Gym, cleansing rituals, reading Soseki, keeping that psychological wall intact. He's internalized the rule: the tougher he is, the smaller the world seems.
But on the 8th day, that internal storm manifests externally, and the wall just crumbles.
Which brings us to the mysterious blackout. Suddenly, Kafka wakes up in some thick brush near a Shito shrine. He's lost about 4 hours of memory.
This is the moment the sandstorm officially breaches his defenses.
And the physical evidence of those missing hours is it's terrifying and visceral. A chilling counterpoint to Oshima's elegant philosophical theories.
His left shoulder aches from an injury he can't remember, but there's no visible, deep wound.
But his white t-shirt is soaked in fresh, sticky, dark blood. And the shape is so eerie, sort of like a huge butterfly with wings spread.
We have to pause on that image,
Yeah.
the butterfly. It's blood, which suggests violence and death, but it's shaped like this archetype of transformation, of emergence.
The sandstorm has arrived, and it promises metamorphosis, but only through a violence he did not consciously commit.
And the panic is immediate, and it's rational. The blood isn't his. He checks himself, no serious wounds, so it must belong to someone else.
And the blackout leaves him terrified with this chilling internal accusation: maybe you were the perp.
And that fear is deeply rooted in his suppressed history of rage. He admits to Crow that sometimes he flies into a rage like I blow a fuse, and he's lost control and been violent before.
But never this bad, never with blood evidence.
Right. The sandstorm, which he thought was symbolic, has now manifested as real physical blood in the outside world, covering him in what could be evidence of an unknown, maybe even fatal crime.
This forces him out of his carefully built life at the library. He can't go back to his hotel. He's afraid the police will track him down.
So he turns, in desperation, guided by that karmic connection.
To the only person he's genuinely connected with, Sakura. He calls her, and she immediately provides this practical, compassionate sanctuary.
She meets him at a convenience store, so practical again, and quickly assesses the situation. Does a medical check, just a hard bump, nothing's broken.
And then there's this moment of startling intimacy. It's not sexual, but she gives him this physical release, massaging his shoulder, helping him relax enough to sleep.
It's a critical, tender moment of temporary sanctuary. He gets compassion, the other half of that proverb.
But he knows he can't stay.
He can't. Staying means dependency, vulnerability. It would weaken the very wall he built to survive. The next morning, he cleans her messy apartment as repayment and just leaves.
He gets rid of the bloody t-shirt, ditches the hotel room, but he takes the memory and that underlying fear with him. He is now completely unmoored.
And he's heading back to the Kimura library, sensing that fate is about to drag him in some even stranger directions.
That terrifying moment, the realization that his internal rage might be manifesting as external criminal violence, it just demands a comparison to our second protagonist.
Who also had his life irrevocably altered by a sudden, violent external event that completely erased his memory.
Exactly. We have to now turn to the Rice Bowl Hill incident.
This shift in the narrative is so fascinating because we're jumping from this intimate internal monologue to what is presented as factual, archival source material.
U.S. Army intelligence reports, dated May 1946, released years later. It gives the whole thing this immense historical, almost chillingly objective weight.
The official timeline details the sudden, bizarre collapse of 16 fourth-grade children in Yamanashi Prefecture on November 7, 1944. They're on an outing to gather mushrooms in a clearing called Owanyama, or Rice Bowl Hill.
And the date itself is important. Late 1944. A time of intense anxiety and war.
The initial official trigger, according to that 1946 report, was seeing a single high-flying plane. They thought it was a B-29 bomber in a clear sky. Immediately after that, the entire class just simultaneously collapses, a collective psychological rupture.
The symptoms described by the teacher, Setsuko Okamochi, and the town doctor, they were medical anomalies.
The children were limp, almost comatose. Their pulse was dangerously low, their temperature subnormal, but their eyes were wide open.
Blinking and slowly tracking something invisible, or on a distant horizon. It's like their consciousness wasn't gone, it was just preoccupied somewhere else.
The investigation immediately looks at wartime threats. The local doctor rules out poisoning. The military doctor, Major Toyama, confirms that, yeah, the Army was developing chemical weapons, but he states unequivocally none were stored in that prefecture.
So they're chasing these big geopolitical explanations for a very personal phenomenon.
Which leads to the official conclusion, the one that let them file it away. Mass hypnosis.
This diagnosis was supported by a Professor Tsukayama from Tokyo Imperial University, and the symptoms fit the profile. Low vitals, the strange eye movements, and critically, the profound memory lack.
Not just forgetting a trauma, but having the entire 2-hour experience just extracted, like an empty train car vanishing from the track.
And to make it seem less unique, Professor Tsukayama provides historical precedents.
Right, 30 students collapsing in England in the 1930s, 15 teenage girls in Australia in the late 19th century. They all shared the same pattern: simultaneous collapse, recovery, and no lingering physical effects.
So this framed the Rice Bowl Hill incident as this recurring, unexplained feature of mass human consciousness, not some unique war crime.
And the investigation ended there. But one child, Satoru Nakata, did not recover. And the American investigation was based on a fundamental lie.
The hidden truth.
Revealed decades later. In 1972, the teacher, Setsuko Okamochi, wrote a confession to the professor. She revealed she'd lied to the military and the Americans to keep up appearances during wartime.
And the real catalyst was so much smaller, so much more personal and intimate and embarrassing than a B-29 bomber.
The night before, she'd had this intensely realistic, sexually charged dream about her husband, who was away at war. And that trauma was compounded when, on the hill, her period started unexpectedly, prematurely.
And this is the moment of pure shame and guilt that erupts into violence. She goes to hide the bloody towels.
But Satoru Nakata, the curious boy, finds them, and he walks toward her, holding them.
And she's just overwhelmed by shock, embarrassment, guilt over her fantasies, and this public exposure of a private female function.
So she violently slaps Nakata, repeatedly, in front of the entire class.
That act of personal, raw, uncontrollable violence, a moment frozen in time, that was the trigger.
The mass collapse happened after the violence, not before. And the mass amnesia served this huge psychological function. It erased the memory of the bloody towels and the teacher striking the child. It preserved the facade of normal wartime life and protected the adult's reputation.
And this is the critical insight that links this historical event to Kafka's trauma in the present day.
The cause wasn't a military weapon or a foreign plane. It was the explosive intersection of repressed sexuality, wartime grief, and sudden public shame. It reveals that the most devastating violence is often the smallest, most hidden, most intimate.
And it has the power to fundamentally rewrite a person's consciousness.
Which perfectly sets the path for Satoru Nakata's unique fate.
Right. So let's get into the other half of this story. Satoru Nakata, the inverse of Kafka's experience.
Nakata was the only child who didn't recover right away. He stayed in a stable coma, which the source calls spear projection, for 2 weeks.
And the detail about how he woke up is so bizarre.
It is. He wakes up out of the blue right after a nurse draws a blood sample and a little bit spills on the sheets.
So blood, the same violent element that marks Kafka's blackout, is what's necessary for Nakata's return to consciousness. It's the shared mysterious connection between them.
And when he woke up, the slate was just wiped clean. Complete memory loss. He couldn't remember his parents, his home, his own name.
Stripped of all biographical details. And crucially, he lost the ability to read and write.
But this devastating loss of essential human knowledge came with this unique, mystical gain. He could now communicate with cats.
He lives this life of beautiful, almost mystical poverty.
A municipal subsidy for the elderly handicapped. He accepts his dumb status because he sees it as a form of protection.
Right. He doesn't have to deal with complicated, violent knowledge like opera or BMWs or reading the news. Knowledge that only seems to complicate and confuse the world.
For Nakata, life is now simple. Morning gets light, evening gets dark. He eats 3 meals a day.
But this simple life is complicated by his unique purpose. He's an unpaid cat finder in Nakano Ward, Tokyo.
And he operates within this strict, highly detailed hierarchy of feline intelligence and personality.
Yeah, his cat taxonomy is remarkably detailed. It proves that while he's illiterate in human terms, he's mastered this complex linguistic and psychological framework for a whole other species.
Black cats, like Otsuka, are easy to talk to. Siamese cats, like Mimi, are the easiest and smartest. Mimi knows about opera, car models, sophisticated terms.
And she knows that for some cats, the word tuna is just this limited, all-encompassing term for anything good to eat.
Then you have the striped brown cats, like Kawamura, who are the hardest. They speak in these incomprehensible riddles. Crouch on pavement, Kawara's in trouble.
It highlights this paradox of knowledge, doesn't it? Nakata is illiterate, but he's engaging in complex linguistic mediation between species. He gets that words carry different weights in different worldviews.
He's a fascinating counterpoint to Kafka, who wants to absorb all knowledge. Nakata proves that a loss of general knowledge can lead to a gain in specific, powerful, transcendent understanding.
So Nakata's current mission is to find a lost tortoiseshell cat named Gamar. And this search leads to a critical, profound conversation with the black cat, Otsuka.
Who points out a physical anomaly related to his amnesia.
His shadow.
Otsuka observes that Nakata's shadow is faint, that it looks like half of it had gotten separated from him. His shadow is incomplete.
And Otsuka links this partial shadow directly to Nakata's ability to talk to cats, suggesting the event in 1944 didn't just take his memory, it literally split his soul.
The implication is huge. Otsuka tells him he needs to stop looking for lost cats and start searching for the other half of your shadow.
And Nakata acknowledges he felt a shadow was weak, but he never considered the psychological state of the shadow itself, that it could have an inferiority complex for being incomplete.
And this external search for a missing piece of himself, this literal embodiment of his amnesia, is immediately complicated by a new, violent threat that comes through the cat world.
Mimi, the smart Siamese, warns him
About a very tall man who wears a strange tall hat and long leather boots. This man catches cats by luring them with tuna good food and stuffing them into a sack.
And the cats believe this man, who is more dangerous than you can ever imagine, might have taken Goma.
Nakata can't even picture what a strange tall hat looks like. He lacks the visual and conceptual knowledge. So he decides he just has to wait for this man in a vacant lot, trusting that he'll recognize him instantly.
It's this passive surrender to a looming violent fate.
And it connects his origin, the hidden violence of the slap that caused his amnesia, to his current mission, which is a likely confrontation with a new form of violence, a violence that literally deals in stolen shadows and captured consciousness.
His dumb status means he's unprepared for this, but his unique skill means only he can face it, because only he understands the warning.
So now we have the two narratives established. Kafka, the runaway, covered in unknown blood, seeking radical transformation in a remote place.
And Nakata, the amnesiac, waiting in an empty Tokyo lot for a dangerous man who deals in literal shadows. Which brings us to the convergence and Kafka's final retreat into isolation.
The initial interlocking fates are clear, even before they meet. They both live in the same general area of Tokyo, Nogata-Nakano Ward, and both are fundamentally defined by unresolved violence and this huge traumatic hole in their memory.
And the nature of the violence echoes. Kafka's internal metaphysical sandstorm has manifested the physical presence of violence, the butterfly bloodstain.
Which echoes the suppressed, embarrassing violence, the slap, the shame, that define Nakata's past. Both are victims of a mysterious psychological violence that resulted in physical alteration and memory loss.
The pressure on Kafka becomes unbearable after the blackout. Even with Sakura's kindness and support, that temporary stability, he leaves.
He realizes that dependency would weaken the wall he had to build. He checks out of the hotel, sensing that this sandstorm of fate is taking him to even stranger, more isolated places where he can only rely on himself.
So he goes back to the Kimura library, the one place of structure and order he considered his real home.
And Oshima immediately senses his distress and proposes a solution. A radical solution, but one that's structurally sound within the library's foundation.
It's an offer of ultimate sanctuary, but at the cost of all civilization.
Oshima offers Kafka a job as his assistant and, more importantly, a place to stay. A remote, primitive log cabin deep in the Kochi Mountains.
He gets approval from Miss Psyche, the Foundation boss.
And Oshima, being the unusual one himself because of his hemophilia, he sees Kafka's willpower and his need for seclusion as assets. He recognizes a kindred spirit, someone seeking unconventional solutions to existential problems.
And the destination is just extreme. The cabin was built by Oshima's surfer brother, the total antithesis of Oshima's intellectual world.
And it's essentially cut off from modernity. The details are absolute. No electricity, no running water, just a spring-fed stream, no TV, no radio, no cell service. Kafka is instantly cut off from every external system of support, tracking, and information.
This is it, his final, complete retreat. He achieves the ultimate realization of his lonely explorer feeling.
But it's a profoundly paradoxical freedom, isn't it? He's completely isolated and physically vulnerable. They're far from any help, and Oshima's own physical fragility means he has to be careful.
Yet he's safe from external pursuit. He's forced to rely only on his internal resources, his reading, his planning, his willpower.
And then there's that explicit, chilling warning from Oshima, which comes from his own terrifying experience.
Do not go deep into the dense, pathless forest.
Oshima describes getting lost just a couple hundred yards from the cabin, realizing that even this small country contains this vast, confusing, untamed wilderness that can just swallow a person whole.
That detail is paramount. The internal sandstorm has forced him to a physical location that literally embodies the existential danger of the original metaphor. The dense forest is the physical manifestation of the unknown part of himself, the part that harbors violence and memory loss.
This location forces him into the very eye of his own internal storm, where a confrontation with his true self is now inevitable.
He's now positioned to absorb that accumulation of the imperfect, just as Oshima suggested. All he can do is read and think. He has to use his knowledge not to run, but to sit still and wait for his new identity to solidify.
Or for the storm to consume him.
So as we wrap up, we have to synthesize the knowledge paradigms of these two linked destinies.
Right. What we've witnessed are two very different approaches to dealing with trauma and the search for a persistent self. Nakata's trauma, the slap, the shame, the amnesia, it was the direct result of hidden, explosive, intimate violence.
And that trauma carved him into a new shape, one defined by unique, non-human knowledge, the language of cats.
Kafka's story is still unfolding, but his flight suggests he's trying to outrun or survive a self-directed, transformative violence, the sandstorm. And it has already physically marked him with someone else's blood.
The fact that the amnesia in the Rice Bowl Hill incident erased the most shameful moment, the slap, suggests that Kafka's 4-hour blackout is probably hiding a similarly violent, shameful, or identity-destroying truth about his origins.
And now, both are focused on a solitary mission based on extreme isolation and observation. Kafka is in a log cabin where he can only read and think, forced to define his identity by sheer internal toughness. He's following Oshima's advice about accumulating the imperfect.
He seeks strength through intellectual mastery.
But Nakata's fate presents a clear paradox about the true value of knowledge. Nakata, stripped of essential human knowledge literacy, basic facts, history gained access to this unique, mystical understanding of animal communication and shadows. It allows him to navigate the unseen forces of the world.
So Kafka wants to acquire all knowledge to survive. But the question is, which kind of knowledge actually enables you to apply it and survive in a chaotic, violent, karmic world?
Is Kafka's intellectual armor going to be enough? Or will he find out, like Nakata did, that true survival requires losing some essential piece of your humanity to gain a more primal, necessary skill? His retreat isolates him from the very sources of human knowledge he desperately craves.
The sources leave us at this moment of impending convergence. It's a highly tense, double cliffhanger.
Kafka is now physically safe, but psychologically cornered deep in the mountains. waiting for his transformation.
And Nakata is physically vulnerable, sitting alone in a vacant lot in Tokyo, but psychologically ready, waiting for a confrontation with a figure that threatens his very essence.
The tall man who harvests shadows and steals the consciousness of cats. The storm is not over for either of them. They are both waiting for the final physical manifestation of their psychological battles.
Nakata, the simple amnesiac, is waiting for his other half to reappear through a violent confrontation.
And Kafka, the tough intellectual, is waiting for the violence he committed during his blackout to return to him in the deep woods.
So the question remains, what part of Kafka's memory loss and Nakata's missing half-shadow is the final piece of the puzzle that will be brought together by the man in the strange tall hat and long leather boots?
The final test of whether the sandstorm is truly over is not in escaping it, but in surviving the confrontation with the violence it promises. Whether that violence is existential, physical, or karmic, only then will the imperfect self become whole.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into identity, fate, and the true cost of escape. We'll leave you to consider. If your shadow is half of your essence, does the act of seeking it out constitute a return to your original self, or merely the creation of a new, equally split being? Join us next time.